So basically what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you how to create the basic structure of a page. So last week we kind of did the header, a bit of the menu, the links. So what I'm going to start off with is start creating containers, and some of them are going to be like the nav bar. So you generally just have the navigation there. And in my styles, I'm just going to have styles here at the top. Should be style. And I'll just put nav here, and I'll say a width of, I don't know, I'll just do it 600 so far, 600 px, and a height of, say, 40 px, and we can always adjust these if we want to. And maybe a background color, I'll just do yellow so it kind of stands out. And if we preview this, okay, we may need to put some content here, height, width, say navigation here. Okay, so we're going to get navigation there. And we'll do some links in there later on, but the main thing is we're going to create a wrapper that's going to hold everything. So at the top I'm going to have a wrapper, and I'm going to give it a width of, I'll just say 700, and you can do percentages, being more responsive website, but I'll just do, say, 800 px. And I'll have a height which is going to be auto. So the purpose of auto is it's going to automatically change in size based on the content I have. So it's going to be fairly dynamic. So now on my body tag, I'm going to include div id equals wrapper, and it's in quotes. And here I have the navigation. I'm just going to tab it across, so it's a bit easier to read. And then I'm going to close my div container, of course. And nothing's going to happen when we refresh it. Let's see, double quotes here. So some typos on my end. Let's try again. Okay, everything is still the same. And for the sake of it, I'm just going to do color, background color. I'll just do background color to maybe gray. And there's no height because there's no content there. So I'm going to stick with that. So go background color gray, and I'll just do height of let's do 500 px. See how it looks. Okay, there it is. Okay, so there's my wrapper. So everything is going to fall in my wrapper. So we're kind of basically building the structure of our web page. Okay, and above, so depending on where you want the navigation bar will also determine where you want the header. So you could have some kind of a header here, and we could say header, and I'll just put text here, header here, and if we do a refresh, we've got header there. Okay, but we don't have any dimensions. So before I go about doing my dimensions for the header and the nav and working on that, I want to center my page. I want to make sure that it looks clean. I could do this later on if I want to. I've generally got a width of 800 px, and if you can recall, how do you center a page? How do you center a page? So I want to center my wrapper, so I'm going to put, I want to center those, so I'm going to say margin left, margin right. So now if we refresh this, that's going to be always centered based on, the size of the browser. So at least we know that that's centered. I'm going to go with a gray background, and I could also do the body. Remember my body here? I could say, maybe I want something for the body. So I could say body, background, color. I'm going to have a background color of, I'll just do black for the sake of it. So at least we can see what's happening. I'm going to refresh, and there's my black for the background body. And you can always add rounded corners and so on, and drop shadows. We'll do that later on as we move forward. But right now we have the wrapper, we have a header. So I'm going to give some dimensions to headers, and the way basically this should be structured, I'd always say wrapper first, then try to put in sequence based on how the objects appear on your page. So I'm going to have header here. So I'm going to say header, and I'm going to give it a width. So the width of my my wrapper was 800, so I'll probably say 790 px, and I'll give it a height, and I'll say 250 px. Now if I refresh this, it's a bit too big, 250, so I'm going to change it to 150 and see how that works out. So I'll probably go with that 150. I'll work with that. And you can introduce padding, the top, left, right, but we're not going to worry about that right now. Okay, before we do that, I want to include some kind of an image for my header. So I'm going to go online, and I'm going to look for images. I don't know, what shall we, what's the website on? Any ideas? What was that? What? Let's do HR. No, I don't want it to be Seahawks. Let's do Hawks. Come on. We should still be in that kind of fever, I guess. Seahawks. Yeah, there may be some Bronco supporters out there. Well, tough. So I'm just going to take this this image with Sherman there. I'm just going to copy it. Copy the image. And you can use lots of tools out there to resize images. What I'm going to be using, what's on these machines, is Fireworks. It's a watered down version of Photoshop. So I'm just going to use that, and I'll just chop it out, so resize it. So my header, in our case, while that's loading, so our header is going to be 790 by 150. So I've kind of taken this image, I'm going to save it. I've kind of taken this image, I'm going to save it. File, save as. And I'm going to save it in. Generally, you should create a folder for all your images. So I'm going to create a folder, I'm going to call it images. And I'm going to call this image header. And I'll save it as a JPEG. And I'm done there. I'll just save that for the sake of it. It's a PNG. And now I want to add a background image. I'm not going to insert the image on that background. I just want the background image for this particular div container, which is the header. So I want to see how would you insert a background image just for the container. So I'm not going to insert it here. You know what we're normally used to? We normally do img source. So we don't want to do that. I want to include it right over here. So you're going to have to include an image here in the background. The purpose of that is we can still have text which can interlace on top of it, just like here we have header here. So I'm going to give you a minute or so to see what you can find to include an image from your CSS. So I'm just going to go to Google. So let's try Googling what we're looking for. So we're going to google.com, and I want to do CSS background image. Okay, and it takes me to W3 Schools, and let's see what's available here. And okay, here it is. That's what I'm actually looking for. Background image with a URL. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to take it here, and I'm going to paste it. Background image URL, and of course I need to change the image name. So my image name was header.jpg. I'm going to save it, and let's see, what did I miss out on? Oh, it's in images, isn't it? It's in the folder images. Okay, there it is. There's my image. Now the benefit of this is I still have text on top of it. So let me actually get rid of this, and I'm going to put Go Hawks. And I'll do this as a H1 tag. And now if we refresh it, you can see Go Hawk. So of course I can change the text of that if I want to. So I can come back here and I can say my H1 tag, and I could say color white. Here's white. Obviously it's not the best of color, so I'd probably want to shift that across, and I could have another container. We could work on that later, so we're not too fussed on that. But you could see what you can do. I could say, you know, floated right. So I could say, you know, I want to float it right. Float right, and it should float right. So you could do all these kind of wonderful things there. But generally we have the header, and of course it's not perfectly lined. We need to introduce padding, margins, and so on. We can do that later. Okay, so the next thing what we need to do, we need to create the nav bar. So now currently I just have navigation here, and in the textbook it states you know, you can have it in tables. We don't want to do this in tables. The way you actually create nav bars is by a list. So it's going to be, we could just do with OL. Remember OL? Who remembers that? Yeah, so I'm just going to put LI, home, and I'll just do schedule maybe. Contact. Okay, that's what we get. So generally we need to change this to an unordered list. UL. Okay, now this is where you guys come in. I want you to spend the next 5-10 minutes see how you can convert that to a horizontal set of options or links. How would you do that? Of course, remember you have to remove the text decoration to get rid of the bullets. We did that some time back. And then you have to do something with floating. So I'm going to give you the next 10 minutes to see if you come up with how you would create a set of links in the nav bar using unordered list. Okay, so if we look at the solution, so what I have here, before I actually do that, I'm going to actually launch this in Dreamweaver. It's easier to read in Dreamweaver, but I don't want you guys using that. So I'm going to launch Dreamweaver. Okay, so now if we look at the code, we've got the wrapper. Okay, so now if we look at the code, we've got the wrapper, which we did earlier on. We've got the header with the background image. We've got the H1, which is down here, further over here. Then we have the nav, which is width 600, height. And what I did here was I did float left. If I remove that, then refresh it, that yellow bar generally disappears because that's hidden underneath. So I need to have it float left. So the way things generally line up whenever you place code or place objects, so you're going to get, say if this is the header, then you get the, if you want something floated, you're going to have it float just here next to that. If there's no room on this side, if there's no room here, it's going to actually come down here. So that's what float left means. So depending on the outside wrapper. So that's why actually I put float left there, float left, and you could even remove that. You know, we can go without the nav, and it'll still work. It'll still work because the UL takes care of that. Now, if we even get rid of the nav tags, it works perfectly fine. So what I can do is I can say, you know, background color for UL. So I can have, I'll just copy some background color from the wrapper, maybe change it to yellow. See, background color UL, I probably haven't given it a height, so I have to float it. So I'll have to float it, so I'm going to avoid that and just go back to the nav so you can actually see it. So there's my container. Then in addition to that, I've got LI. So once with the LIs, these are the links. So I've got the links with the anchor tags within the LI tags. And what I've done here is I've given it a width. If I was to get rid of the width and the left float, they're going to generally overlap each other or come down because it's on left floated. I'm just going to do left float now. Get rid of the width. And they'll kind of be fairly tight to each other. So that's why I've actually given it a dimension. And I said width, I think it was 70px. So there's going to be 70px between these, so 70 pixels width between them. And then of course I've got the anchor link. What color do I want? Decoration. Do I need a text decoration around that? No, I don't. I don't want the underline. If it hovers over, it changes color. So that kind of gives you the basic structure of the bar, or the nav bar. So we're back to our nav bar, and we can have rounded corners around this, but we haven't yet done that. So I could say my UL. This is my UL. I could have the individual LIs with a background color, width, and a height. So I could say I want a width and a height and maybe a background color. You could do a background color for any object you like. You could do that as you go along, so it looks much more cleaner. You could also have the bottom corners being curved corners, so you could have this like that. I mean, if you get the drift, you could do that. So you could do all kinds of things with the menus, but that gives you an idea of how your page would be structured. Now following this, and I will give you this code, I'll put this on online available for you. So I've got the nav, then I could have other areas. So I could have maybe I'm just going to call it div id equals left. I'm going to call it LFT, and I'll close it. And you're probably thinking, geez, Dreamweaver seems so easy, it's suddenly populating everything for me. Yes, it is. But Dreamweaver's you generally use it later on down the road when you're fairly comfortable with the coding. So still stick to Notepad. Okay, so I've got div id left, or LFT, and now I'm going to do LFT, and I'm going to give it a width. So any container you create, you give it a width and a height. So I'm going to say 300px, and I'll say a height of, I'll say 500px, and I'll do a background color, and I'll just do green, or maybe slightly different color. And now if we refresh it, there's my container on this side. So I could have an image here if I want to. And of course you're probably wondering, it doesn't look that great. I could push this down, move it a bit to the right. I could center it. That's when you could introduce margin and padding. So that's going to be covered as we move forward. But right now you can get the idea of how I'm building my page. And here I could say image here. So I'm just creating basic containers which are giving me information of what I'm going to put in here. Then I could have another container, and I could say div right. I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to put RGHT for right. I'm not spelling it right. Sometimes you can get confused and use the properties. So that's why I'm using more abbreviations. So I'm going to do the same thing here, right. I'm going to change this to RGHT, and I'll give it a width of maybe 500. And let's see what happens when we do this. Okay, it appears at the bottom. So I'm just going to change its color. I'm going to change the color to something that we can remember, maybe a kind of blue. Why that's happening is because everything's appearing one after the other. So I have to float it. So I could say float And I'll try left and let's see what happens. Again, it's still there. Why is that? Because my width is 500, so I may want to reduce that down to 300. Okay, let's make it bigger. Okay, now it's saying, because I may want to float my top container too. I'm going to float that left too. But generally what you would do, you'd have a container, and within that you'd have two containers. You'd have one floats left and the other one floats right. And you could have something in the middle. Okay, and there. So what I've actually done here, I've floated this container here, which is, and I'll just put that down here. I'll say LFT container. I'll do the same thing here. I'll just name it. So this is for your own reference. RGHT. You could see it's left container, right container. I still have enough room, because remember our wrapper was, if we can remember, it was 800 pixels. So I can say, you know, I can make it bigger. So I could make it, I could do this one 500. Okay, and there it stretches out right to the end. Now I can have content here, content there. Now if you can recall when we did tables, you know, you're creating the cells and you can throw data into that. So here we can actually put all kinds of data, images, whatever you like. And once again, you can also clean up the navigation. I could stretch that out to, you know, 800 if that's what I want. I mean, currently that's set to width. I have a typo. Yeah, there, width. So I have a width, and now I could center my header at the top. But you could see we've got the basic structure of our web page. The basic structure of your web page. Of course, you can make it much cleaner. Images really do make your page stand out, rather than just having containers of different colors. I could have rounded corners here. I could include gradients. So we will be doing more of that on when we get to CSS. And right at the end, we could also have a footer. So we could have a footer. So I'll just do footer. And HTML5 provides you the tags for footer, header, and so on. So I'll just have footer here. And I'm going to include footer. And I'm going to try to copy width. Of 800, a height of maybe 100. I'll keep a background color as grey. And you can see it's actually over here because we don't have content, so I can have that float all the way right to the bottom. That's why it's appearing at the top. So I'm just going to include margin left, margin auto, so my footer is kind of centered. Okay, so it's behind here, so you can't push that. So if I was to actually add content here, so on the left, I'll just do paragraphs. And I'll just make it easier. Wrong one. Let's go back. Okay, and once you do add content, what you can do is you can say, you know, I want that to float left too. If you come back down here, and I've just put some spaces there for the sake of it, and you can say, you know, I want to float that left. But it depends on if it's in the wrapper. Now if we can recall, now here's footer, it's not in the wrapper, so that could be another reason why. So sometimes it's always good to place it in the wrapper, so it's outside of the wrapper. Once again, it depends on how you want to structure that. So it's appeared at the bottom, but I've floated it all the way to the left. So it just depends what your height and width is. So that kind of gives you an idea, you know, how you would basically structure your web page. So that you should start off with that, put the links on, so you've got your basic page created, and don't move on to the subsequent pages until you've kind of finalized it. You know, you need to make it look cleaner. It's always a good idea to look at other pages for inspiration. You know, what kind of color scheme they've used, and that should give you an idea. And I'll put this code on available to you guys.